Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam, total world victory of Hare Krishna. My name is Sitapati Das, and this is Bhagavad-gita 4.10. Bhagavad-gita, the Song of God, chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge, text number 10. Let me change my name to Sitapati Das. From there. Okay, let's go. Jai Srila Prabhupada. vīta-rāga-bhaya-krodhā, man-mayā mam upāśritāḥ, bahavo jñāna-tapasā, pūtā mad-bhāvam āgatāḥ. Vīta, freed from, raga, attachment, bhaya, fear, krodhāḥ, anger, mat-mayā, fully in me, mam, unto me, upāśritāḥ, being fully situated, bahavaḥ, many, jñāna, knowledge, tapasā, by penance, pūtāḥ, being purified, mat-bhāvam, transcendental love for me, āgatāḥ, attained. Āgatāḥ, attained. Translation. But being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially attached to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep the same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. Because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal void. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence, attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. Furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause, and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world: negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. The last stage of the devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. According to Bhakti-rasa-amrita Sindhu, the science of devotional service, adau shraddha tata sadhu sangota bhajana kriya, tatonartha nivriti syat tato nishta ruchis tata, ata saktis tato bhavas tata prem abhyudanchati. Sadhaka nam ayam premna pradurbhave bhavet kramaha. In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service, under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment, attains steadiness and self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest stage, perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So, by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearfulness of one's spiritual personality, individual spiritual personality, and from the frustrations resulting from void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord. Om jnana-timirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshur unmilitam yena tasmai sri gurave namaha. Okay, let's read the verse again. Vīta-rāga-bhaya-krodhā man-mayā upāśritāḥ bahavo jñāna-tapasā pūtā mad-bhāvam āgatāḥ. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Let's have a look at the change set. Nothing changed between the first and second edition in the translation. In the purport, that's a very long sentence. What? Are you telling me that's... No, okay, generally. So starting from generally. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable. Possible for them to understand that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge. Understand how to that. Okay. How the Supreme can be a person like themselves. Such a materialist person like can be a person. Somehow that got dropped in the first edition. Let's have a look. The text missing from the 1972 edition was included in the Collier Macmillan abridged edition published in 1968. And it's present in the original manuscript. Those are the kind of Second edition edits. That makes sense. Okay. Embarrassed, stylistic change. Underlies the frustration of life becomes arises from frustration in life. Where is that? Okay, it's before the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu section. And voidness under the frustration in life. One has to get rid of all these three stages of attachment to the material world. Negligence of spiritual life, fear of personal identity, and voidness under the frustration of life. One has to take complete center of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master. Maybe that was meant to be shelter. Okay, so the original had voidness under the frustration of life. Yeah, I wouldn't have changed that. I wouldn't have changed that. What does it say in here about that? Attachment, fear, and anger. Now, I really wish I could read this note. Let me do this. I can read this note, actually. If I download this, I'll put it into my downloads. Save. And then we're on 410, so let me roll down to 410. I'll just read it out loud. You won't be able to see it on your screen. In the video, 7, 4, 8, 4, 9, 410. Here we go. It's not even showing up in here. Acrobat. Reader. Okay. File. Open. So I need to open it in Adobe Acrobat Reader to be able to see this. It doesn't show up in preview. Doesn't show up well in the browser. But in this, it does show up. Okay, that's 1233. That's way too far. Text number 8. 9. Text number 10. Here we go. Arises from. Okay. I can read it to you. Original manuscript. One has to get rid of all these three stages of attachment to the material world, fear of personal identity, and voidness under frustration of life. Srila Prabhupada is describing attachment, fear, and anger. Mistakenly thinking that Srila Prabhupada was speaking about three stages of attachment to the material world, an editor put a colon after world and added negligence of spiritual life. So that actually, you can see it in here. There. Colon, negligence of spiritual life. These three stages of attachment to the material world, fear of personal identity, and voidness under frustration of life. So those are actually the three stages. They're not three stages of attachment. They are three stages. This is an interesting one here. Three stages. The three stages. Let's find it. Three stages. Yeah, so you see here, one has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world, colon, and then stage 1, negligence of spiritual life. Stage 2, fear of a personal spiritual identity. And phase 3, the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life. In edition 2, second edition, we see that the 3 stages are 3 stages of material consciousness. It's being freed from the 3 stages. Where's the 3 stages in here? Okay, let's have a look. Just before the Bhakti Rasa Amrita Sindhu. Three stages. Okay. Arises from. So what I'm looking at here is that this change set is out of date. It's out of date. Because in here you can see that it has one has to get rid of all 3 stages of attachment to the material world, revise and enlarge, chapter 4. But in this most recent one, it says one has to get rid of all 3 stages of material consciousness. One has to get rid of all 3 stages of material consciousness. Mistakenly thinking that Srila Prabhupada was speaking about 3 stages of attachment, and editor put a colon after the world and added negligence of spiritual life. But what Srila Prabhupada is saying is that one has to get rid of these 3 stages, namely attachment, fear, and voidness under frustration. And I ought to have fixed this. Later, in fact, in 2008, the BBT editors did fix it. And so in later printings, the text reads, one has to get rid of all 3 stages of material consciousness, attachment to material life. Can I screenshot this? I can. Can I do this? I can. Right. Very good. It'll be in the video. Later, in fact, in 2008, the BBT editors did fix this. And so in later printings, the text reads, one has to get rid of all 3 stages of material consciousness, attachment to material life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. So, I think this call is on the money, and it's the kind of call that should have been made in the first edition, and it wasn't made then. And then the way that they've done it here is now they have this thing that they call the second edition, but it's not the second edition, because you can see that, they got one edit in 1983 and then another edit in 2008, and the 2008 and the 1983 books are different. And they're both called the so-called second edition. So they have just this process of mutating this book over time unlimitedly, which just lacks integrity. In terms of the... Wow, okay. Well, in terms of the... Oh, man, it's just the complete re-editing. It's just a re-editing and then re-editing and then re-editing. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's no safety in that process. Okay, but back to the original here. So those 3 things that, let's have a look at it here. The 3 stages of material consciousness, namely raga, bhaya, and krodhāḥ. Frustration, conception of void. So raga, attachment to the material life. Bhaya, fear of a spiritual personal identity. and krodhāḥ, the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. Yeah, I mean, it's great, but you should have left it the way it was and then written that as a commentary on it rather than going in and editing it. Okay, now what I'm dealing with is Ian says, it sounds like somebody edited a document and saved it that got overridden by a second save from somebody else. Yeah, except that this was all done using pen and paper and sending things back and forth in the mail, because this was done in like 1967 or 68, 69, 70, and it was published in 72. So they definitely were not saving things by hitting Control S back then. But this change set that I'm using here was obviously generated before 2008. So now I don't have a complete change set between the latest edition and the original. See, I'm using this to look at the changes, but it doesn't actually tell me the complete set of changes. What to do. Problem is I don't have these programmatically. I'd have to scrape the website. Yeah, to generate this. I'll ask around, see if maybe Madhudvisa could do it again. I don't know. I have to get in touch with him. Anyway, back to the this thing here. Let's actually have a look at this, because that's a very interesting point that's been made here. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So Krishna is saying that being fully absorbed in Krishna, taking refuge in Krishna, becoming purified by knowledge of Krishna, one can attain transcendental love for Krishna, the Supreme Person. And this point here, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, that's the point that's being developed in the Purport by Srila Prabhupada, that these are the 3 stages of material consciousness, 3 phases of it, 3 aspects. Attachment, fear, and anger, vīta-rāga-bhaya, and krodhāḥ. You'll see these mentioned many times in Bhagavad-gita by Krishna. There's 3 kind of strands or aspects of material existence, and they could be related to the 3 modes. Krodhāḥ is like mode of passion. Bhaya is the mode of ignorance, the tamagun, mode of passion, rajagun, and raga, sattvagun, attachment. Although you will hear about raga and krodhāḥ being aspects of the mode of passion, bhaya definitely is an aspect of the mode of ignorance. So, yeah, one has to get rid of these, of all 3 stages of attachment to the material world. This is where it got changed here. All 3 stages of attachment to the material world, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that underlies the frustration of life, the sour grapes, Oh, because personality and individuality is the source of so many problems for me, and that's material life, therefore renounce it all. God is impersonal. I will become impersonal. I'll become nothing, or I'll merge into the oneness. And that's kind of like the sour grapes, Let there be nothing then. One has to become free from all 3 of those. See, at the end here, it's made very clear. Freed from all material attachment, raga, from the fearfulness of one's individual spiritual personality, bhaya, and from the frustrations resulting from void philosophy. Krodhāḥ, frustrations that result in void philosophy here. Here it says resulting from void philosophy. Yeah. Resulting from void philosophy, result in void philosophy. From frustrations resulting in void philosophy. What did Srila Prabhupada write originally? And frustration and the frustration of voidness. Yeah, I'd say that the philosophical understanding is sharper here of the editor than in the first edition. But just the license to rewrite the book is not there, so it should have been written as a commentary. Would have been amazing. I would have loved to have read that as a commentary on the Gita, going over it again like that. Maybe I should write a commentary like that. A commentary which is a commentary on the edits. And it's not one of those, they're all wrong. It's like, make the case that they're categorically unauthorized and then go into an examination of them. Imagine if that were possible, because it's kind of difficult because they keep changing it. So it's a moving target. Ian says, what I hear is free to be, free to act. Yeah, exactly. You're not constrained by being a reaction to there's something wrong. It really is, this is it, and it's perfect. Do you have to be free of all three before you can let in Krishna? No, well, here what's being said by Krishna is that these people become completely freed from this, and then they attain transcendental love for Krishna. But as you see here, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada's quoting from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says, in the beginning, one just has to have a preliminary desire for self-realization. That's all that's necessary to begin with. That brings one to the stage of trying to associate with people who are spiritually elevated. And then in the next stage, one becomes initiated by a spiritual master and begins the process of devotional service. So there's a process to the whole thing. It's not kind of like a one moment to the next. It's gradual. There's a saying that says that for every step that we take towards Krishna, he takes 10 steps towards us. We had Tranakarta on here. He was on Vaishnava Voices podcast, which is on another channel, the Vaishnava Voices podcast. And he was seeking, and his dog found a book by Srila Prabhupada. Let me find the Vaishnava Voices podcast and I'll add a link to it. Tranakarta episode was very interesting. This is the other channel with the podcast with guests on it. And his dog found one of Srila Prabhupada's books, and he read the book. It was a Krishna book. And then he started chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And everything took off from there, and it's been like more than 50 years for him. Still going strong. Okay, let's have a look at the Tereo Maori translation. We should get because there was no change between edition 1 and 2 in the verse. Yeah, it's exactly the same. Very good. So at the moment, I'm testing it against Google Translate, because I have a feeling that that ChatGPT cheats. Freed from attachments, fear, and anger, they spread me and sheltered me. Many, many people in the past were ashamed of learning about me, and thus they got the exchange love for me. Okay. Kua whakawatea. Kua means, I don't know, whakawatea. I na whakapiri. Attachment. I te wehi. Terrible. I te riri. Anger. ka whānui, general, tonu, constantly, iaho, me. They spread me and sheltered me. Ka whakaruru, shelter, ki, into, aho, into me. He maha. He maha na tangata, many people. He maha na tangata, many, many people. O mui I whakama. Ashamed of learning about me. Te matauranga moku. Knowledge. Let's take this and see what ChatGPT makes of it. Yeah, you see this? Okay, at this point, it's like, it's just given the exact translation from the Gita, so it's faking it here. Many people were ashamed of learning about me. Naraira there, hua, fifi. Gain, ratau. Nothing. Love, whakawhiti. Transfer. Interchange. Transcendental. I see what it's done. It hasn't been able to get transcendental, so it's okay. What does moku mean? What if I just take this out? Aroha. Moku. Freed from attachments, fear, and anger. What do I want it to say? Being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me. Fully absorbed. Absorbed would be like fully absorbed, focused or dedicated. So fully absorbed in me. Okay, so let's go fully dedicated and absorbed, focused on me. Fully dedicated to, focused on me. Let's see. Okay, so let's try this instead. Kua whakapau kaha tonu ki aho. Expanded me. Spend, devote, or exhaust. Okay. Kaha, strength. Tonu, constantly. Ki, to, me. For me. Into, toward, against. Into me, to me, against me, toward me. free. But what does kua mean? Let's have a look. Have or has, past tense marker. Ka, future. Ana, present. Kua, past. Past, free. I na whakapiwi, free from attachments. I te wehi, in fear. I te riri, anger. Kua, have. Whakapau, devote. Kaha, strength. Tonu, constantly. Ki aho, ka, will. Whanui, tonu, I aho. What if I take this out? If I just rip this piece here out, what does that do? Or ashamed of learning about me. Okay, I definitely need the assistance of a native Te Reo Māori speaker to get this, because ChatGPT is not doing it. Okay, I have a number for someone. I'm going to call them tomorrow. Someone gave me a number of someone who can speak fluent Te Reo Māori and may be able to help us to do this. So I'll speak to them tomorrow, and I'll reach out and see if I can get a hold of Maru Devisa to get an updated change set. I'll do that online. Okay, back to the verse. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks if you made it this far. Vīta-rāga-bhaya-krodhā, man-mayā mam upāśritāḥ, bahavo jñāna-tapasā, pūtā mad-bhāvam āgatāḥ. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger. Being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Total world victory of Hare Krishna. Much love. Jai Srila Prabhupada.